Hi, I'm Hannah Cutler. I'm an Archaeological Officer for Suffolk County Council Archaeological Service, and I'm going to be talking to you about Paleolithic and Mesolithic Suffolk. This is part of Historic Environment Record Enhancement, which has been funded by Historic England. So, what is the Paleolithic and what is the Mesolithic? Well, the Paleolithic is the earliest occupation of Britain in this context, and which goes back in Suffolk about 700,000 years. Various human species, including Neanderthals, modern humans, and the Mesolithic is a much shorter period after this, after the last glacial period. That's a very cold stage, but before the farming in the Neolithic, around 4000 BCE, which is give or take 6,000 years ago. Suffolk is a very important county in England for records, finds and sites of these this age. Early Prehistoric is what we use to refer to the whole Paleolithic and Mesolithic period. These, of course, are subdivided. There's somewhere in the region of 1,600, almost 1,700 historic environment records, and these were improved between 2019 and 2020. There's some of the most important sites in the country, in northwest Europe, such as the earliest occupation in Suffolk at Pakefield on the coast, evidence of fire at Beeches Pit in West Stow, but you also get many other important find types, such as we'll find out, post-glacial long blade sites, and also Mesolithic material that covers the whole county. I've been enhancing the publicly available data set, the Historic Environment Record, which is available online. You can be used for research, it can be used for planning decisions, and as you can see with these images, these maps, there are Paleolithic and Mesolithic evidence all over the county. So a few notes on chronology. Most Paleolithic archaeology is described using marine isotope stages. Now these are the chronological framework used to describe glacial cycles. They're based on oxygen isotope data, marine cores, ice cores, and they reflect changes in temperature derived from these cores. So you can see on this diagram, blue periods indicate cold events, and red areas of the curve indicate warm events. Odd numbers are warm periods and even numbers are cold periods, but the lengths are never equal. The larger the number, the further back in time. So we are currently in marine isotope stage 1. The last glaciation, circa 20,000 years ago, was marine isotope stage 2. The Anglian Glaciation, so called, about 450,000 years ago, was marine isotope stage 12. We tend just to say MIS. The Historic Environment Record, our records are recorded using BC and AD, which is obviously different from using 1,000 years ago, because obviously BC is 2,000-ish years ago from today. But it is also common in when describing Mesolithic material to use BC AD, or you might use here BCE, before Common Era, and CE Common Era, used interchangeably. There are also other older or local names for glacial periods, and these local names often tie up with other names in Europe and North America. This diagram shows the Middle and Late Pleistocene in terms of temperature curves and specific periods within it. It also shows the start of the Holocene, which is the period we are in now. It also shows the length of some of the archaeological technologies present in Britain at those times in the last 700,000 years ish. So another thing to think about when thinking about Paleolithic and Mesolithic archaeology in Britain is that at various points in the last 500,000 years, Britain has been either a peninsula of northwest Europe or an island. And this is due to sea level height relating to how much water was held in ice caps. Britain was an island in marine isotope stage 5e, about 125-ish thousand years ago, and also in MIS 7 and MIS 9 and possibly MIS 11 as well. Depending on sea levels, the area of the North Sea would have been a low plain, which is known in the literature as Doggerland, named after the Dogger Bank. You might have heard that on the shipping forecast on the radio. But Britain was finally separated from Europe in the late Mesolithic, around 6,500 BC. This image on the slide shows how Britain may have looked in marine isotope stage 3 about 50,000 years ago. You can see that Britain is a peninsula. There's a large channel river being fed by the large major rivers of northwest Europe. There's also the Doggerland plain. So let's have a look at the nature of the archaeology in the county. Before it was destroyed by the Anglian Glaciation 450-ish thousand years ago, the Beetham River flowed from the West Midlands through East Anglia and into the North Sea, depositing gravels, which is how we know its approximate route. You get internationally important chroma forest bed deposits of this age. They're found along the coast at Pakefield, which until even older finds were discovered at Haysborough in Norfolk, were the oldest finds in Britain. Hominin human made finds of simple flake tools. These were found around the year 2000. These specific ones shown here were found around 2006. They're probably associated with pre-modern human species known as Homo antecessor. Yes, other occupation after that earliest occupation evidenced at Pakefield, but before the Anglian Glaciation swept over southern England. The remnants of Beetham River gravels are present on the sides of slopes and tops of low-lying hills, and these are arranged in a series of river terraces which are formed as the river successively cuts a deeper and deeper course. And so these preserved settlements, which increase with age, with altitude, occasionally hold amounts of stone tools. You get examples of stone tools probably made by Homo heidelbergensis, a pre-Neanderthal species, which are very well evidenced in the Breckland area. For example, Warren Hill, which is near Mildenhall, which I believe has the largest number of hand axes found in the country. This image is just one of them, but unfortunately, like so many sites, they were dug by workmen, gravel workers in the 19th century and sold to collectors. So understanding of the exact context, the exact date is not so well understood, and there are disagreements. There is currently work being done as part of a project called the Brecon Paleolithic Project. They will be publishing their results soon, I believe. So the Anglian Glaciation in marine isotope stage 12 covered almost all of Britain and including most of Suffolk, or what would become Suffolk, I should say. It can't be shown that the ice ever covered Suffolk again after this, but this ice sheet would have been hundreds of metres thick. It destroyed the Bytham River. It moved the Thames to its current course, further south to where it is now. But when it gradually melted, this ice sheet receded back towards northern regions, and it left the thick deposit of boulder clay and outwash gravels that are present all over Suffolk. Suffolk has many key sites from marine isotope stage 11, which is after the Anglian glaciation. It's also known as the Hoxnian interglacial, a warm period. It's named after the site at Hoxne in northern Suffolk. MIS 11 was a warm period, and the climate has been claimed to be approximately like it is today. The archaeological record of the Hoxnian consists of two stone tall assemblage types, one that lacks hand axes and is termed Clactonian, after the type site at Clacton in Essex, but there are also assemblages with hand axes, which are assigned to the Shirlian, named after the site at Saint-Chul in France. The relationship between these two events, these two assemblages, I should say, has long been a subject of debate. There is also the presence of so-called twisted ovate hand axes, which are figured on the slide. These are hand axes with an S-shaped twist along the cutting edge, which has been claimed and is possibly diagnostic of this period. Key sites include East Farm at Barnham, Foxhall Road in Ipswich, Hoxne, as I said, and sites in Elvedon, West Stow. Beeches Pit in West Stow has evidence of fire use. These are also likely to be associated with Homo heidelbergensis, that prenatal species. To take a closer look at an important site from MIS 11, Beeches Pit in West Stow has had various excavations since the 19th century. Most notably in the 1990s by Liverpool University, you've got a lower Paleolithic, a Shirlian industry, which occurs within interglacial, that's warm period, deposits. It's directly over the top of glacial deposits. You have thermoluminescence dating from burnt flint that shows it's from about 414,000 years ago, plus or minus 30,000 years. And the archaeology consists of a Shirlian hand axes, which also, there's also flakes that refit, which show that flint napping, making of these flint tools happened on site. But there's also, importantly, evidence of burnt sediment that appear to be hearths, indicating possibly a home camp of these Homo heidelbergensis hunter-gatherers, as shown in this this reconstruction, and this possibly shows that that they were using the deciduous forest in a temperate climate, as shown by plant macrofossils and and pollen associated with it, which would have had, there would have been fresh water, potential food, good quality flint. So it shows that possibly this was a site that was repeatedly used over again as a home base. Following the more hand axe based Shirleyan industries, the early Middle Paleolithic, which is likely associated with Neanderthals, or at least possibly an earlier form of Neanderthal. Don't ask me, I'm not a specialist on species. I'm an archaeologist, I like tools. Between 325 and circa 180,000 years ago, you get an industry which is noted for its high use of Levallois technology. Now, Levallois is a prepared flake core, so not using hand axes, pretty much. You get sites in Suffolk such as the Stoke Bone Bed in Ipswich, or Jordan's Pit near Sudbury, but often seem to have groups utilising or living in a temperate grassland, but there would have been woodland present. It's interesting that the region is possibly it's likely uninhabited by, this is true for the whole of England, uninhabited by Neanderthals between MIS 6 and the end of MIS 4. That's a long period, and between 180,000 and 60,000 years ago. Now this is possibly to do with the fact that about 125,000 years ago Britain was an island, or possibly to do with cold periods after that. There have been claims for recolonisation during this period, but that hasn't yet been proved beyond reasonable doubt. Levallois technology is a method of preparing flint cores, sometimes called tortoise cores because of their appearance, so that flakes can be knapped off in a controlled fashion. And as I've said, it was prevalent in the early Middle Paleolithic. This is an example from Suffolk. It's not the best photo, but this diagram on the right does show you roughly in a schematic way how it worked. Also in Suffolk there are a handful of sites associated with the Ipswichian interglacial, a very warm period when Britain was an island, between or roughly around 128 to 116,000 years ago. It's named the Ipswichian after the type site near Ipswich, but it was a warm period, and Neanderthals populations do not appear to have been living in northwest Europe at this time. Now, it's one of the warmest periods for the last 500,000 years, but it's interesting because of a dense deciduous forest, but a unique fauna, including straight-tusked elephant, wild boar, aurochs, which is wild cattle, and also hippopotamus, famously. Generally, that's hippopotamus is the thing that really makes it stand out. You get the site at Bobbitt's Hole, which is the site that gave its name near Ipswich, but also evidence near Newmarket and Lavenham. After the long hiatus in occupation of Neanderthal groups between 180,000 and approximately 60,000 years ago, that's a gap of 120,000 years, there is evidence for Neanderthal occupation of Britain between approximately 60 and 40,000 years ago. This is noted for its use of biface or hand axe technology, as I was talking about. This is related to the Mousterian of Europe, and it's very rare use of Levallois prepared core flake technology. The character of the occupation by Neanderthals in this period is unusual because it's mostly, or at least if you believe the literature, characterised by brief occupations in caves in the west of Britain. However, that's not really the whole story, because there's many discoveries of single, usually one or two hand axes with occasional large assemblages of Neanderthal-made hand axes, often characterised by the so-called bukupe hand axe, which usually means a flat-butted, well-flaked hand axe. Though actually the definition is very broad, and most researchers tend not to completely agree on it. But what is agreed has been shown that it is largely a stage 3 phenomenon, and is definitely associated with Neanderthals, these almost final Neanderthals. But Britain was a stepic environment, so-called mammoth steppe, a kind of stepic environment with large mammoth and woolly rhinos, with brief summers, cold winters, stretched from essentially Britain as a peninsula of northwest Europe all the way across northern Eurasia to North America. But you had patches of marsh, bare sandy ground, but potentially lots of good hunting. But occupation was probably only in brief spurts in Britain at this time, because you had lots of smaller climatic oscillations, and probably they could only have lived in Britain in these warmer events, possibly less than 1,000 years, maybe in terms of hundreds of years, warm periods. So you may be looking at small groups just going into Britain in very brief periods to hunt large fauna. There's a picture of a Neanderthal there and a hand axe from Ipswich. The site in Ipswich where that hand axe came from is the Warren Livingstone pit, which doesn't exist anymore, but in the 1920s was investigated by Reed Moyer, who's a local archaeologist, and Paleolithic implements were found, including cordate hand axes, that means heart-shaped, vaguely, and blade flakes, crested flakes, Mysterian or bukupe hand axes. You can see those kind of flat-butted bifaces that are smaller than those earlier Acheulean hand axes I was talking about. But unfortunately, all of the flint material and mammoth bones were recovered by suction pump to pull up the gravel. So understanding of exactly where it was in the sequence is very difficult to recreate. This small tanged item in the middle there, that's actually an Upper Paleolithic Font Robert point associated with modern humans, also found there. I'll be talking about that in a moment. As we move from the Lower Paleolithic through to from the Middle Paleolithic to the Upper Paleolithic, it's good to talk about blade technology, which generally is what characterises Upper Paleolithic technology. In the past, it used to be very much that the Lower Paleolithic meant pre-Neanderthals, the Middle Paleolithic meant Neanderthals, and Upper Paleolithic meant modern humans. However, now it's showing that blade technology is sometimes present before, but certainly the final Neanderthal occupation, or possibly earliest Upper Paleolithic occupation of Britain, of northwest Europe, was made by Neanderthals. So making blades, it's again a type of prepared core to make long flints that are twice as long as they are wide. That's the definition. You can see on the left here a flint blade, and on the right a type of core which has been prepared so that you can knock, so that that these blades could be taken off the side around the circumference of this shape, so that they could be made long and controlled from the same hitting platform at the top. The earliest Upper Paleolithic in Britain and in Suffolk is represented by the LRJ, which is short for Lincolnbian Renician Yerzmanovician technocomplex, which is found from Britain all the way from Poland to Wales during MIS 3, but this small part of it probably between 42,000-ish years ago. Now there's a few different types of these leaf points, and there is an argument as to whether they are an evolution from earlier Mysterian hand axes, but they're certainly no longer argued to be part of later Solutrean, which is a later modern human made industry, but it's probably not linked to acculturation processes, i.e. it's not Neanderthals copying modern humans as they came into Europe at around this time, possibly a little later. There's a lot of disagreement about dates and the exact timing and nature of modern humans coming into Europe and exactly how those interactions played out with Neanderthals. The earliest modern humans in Britain are represented by Aurignacian assemblages. They're found in the west of Britain, but to date none are found in Suffolk or East Anglia. Now that may be more to do with recovery of archaeology, or it could be to do with some actual reason why they did not favour the region at this time, possibly some nature of flora, fauna, geography, something like that. But you do get so-called Gravettian occupations around 34,000 years ago. These are probably, again, very brief little dispersals in, much like the earlier Neanderthal incursions. There's only 2 examples in Suffolk. They're characterised by these so-called Font Robert tanged points. Again, that's the one that was found in Ipswich at the Warren Livingstone pit. But it suggests, because finds so dispersed across southern Britain, that it's probably Gravettian populations had large ranges hunting large mammals, but kind of heavily mobile groups at this time. Between 31 and 16,000 years ago, humans were absent from Britain due to the expansion of the British-Irish ice sheet, which had been growing since MIS 4. The ice sheet was smaller than previous ice sheets and probably didn't reach southwards into East Anglia beyond the Norfolk coast, but the periglacial climate at the time caused much soil contortion and leaving evidence of ice wedges and the sand present in the Breckland region. But it was also a time of very low sea level, possibly 60 metres lower than it is today. There was a warm spell in the so-called post late glacial interstadial at the end of stage 2, which several human groups occupied. We'll talk about those in a moment. A brief climatic downturn again in the so-called Younger Dryas period for about 1,000 years, and then as the climate improved, heading into what it's like today, you have the Mesolithic period and the various subdivisions within that. The late Upper Paleolithic is a term which is often given to the entire post-glacial period from the beginning of the post-glacial period to the beginning of the Mesolithic. However, in its strictest sense, it's just about that. It describes the initial recolonisation during the beginning of the late glacial interstadial. It's used here synonymously with the so-called Creswellian, which is named after Creswell Crags in Derbyshire, and the Final Magdalenian, which is its name elsewhere in Europe. Final Magdalenian flint assemblages are characterised by blade cores, worked preferentially from a single striking platform using antler or bone, and the classic diagnostic retouched forms are angle-backed pieces known as cheddar and Creswell points. This example here is from Creswell Crags, hence why it's not made on material that you might expect to see in Suffolk, and not that shiny flint that you get on most most stone tools in Suffolk. The landscapes of southern Britain appear to have been dominated by herb-rich grasslands, possibly some juniper scrub, birch trees, but once again, highly mobile communities, possibly dependent on hunting large herbivores, horse, red deer, maybe reindeer, but also once again large territories, likely incorporating the now submerged landscape of Doggerland. Final Paleolithic assemblages are characterised by backed flint blades. That means that they've been blunted on one side. You have curved backed blades and also penknife points, which suggests a link with the chronologically concurrent Federmesser in Germany, and these are present in Britain before disappearing as the beginning of the climatic downturn, the cold period known as the Younger Dryas. The period, the environments inhabited by these groups seem to be birch woodland, but also some temperate woodland, red deer, roe deer, elk, things like that. The Terminal Palaeolithic, which was after the Younger Dryas but before the Mesolithic, between 9,700 and 9,400 BC, is the final lithic industry present in Britain before the Mesolithic, and it's considered related to the Arensbergian technocomplex present in mainland Europe, which is associated with the hunting of large reindeer herds at specific points in their yearly migration in kind of tundra conditions. In Britain, it's most readily identified by long flint blades, over 120 millimetres in length, made from large opposed platform cores and bruised pieces, flakes and blades with heavy edge damage. Important sites in Suffolk include the Devil's Wood Pit in Sproughton near Ipswich, and also the King's Site in Mildenhall, which is just to the north of Mildenhall. There's also very important sites near the river in Brandon. The Mesolithic, which literally means Middle Stone Age, is the name given to the final period before the Neolithic, when farming of crops or animal herding took place. In Britain, it's been variously subdivided in the literature, but can generally be divided into an earlier Mesolithic from 9,000 to 7,000 BC and a late Mesolithic from 7,000 to 4,000 BC. During the Mesolithic, temperatures eventually came like they are today, but the environment would have been more forested. Suffolk would have been an upland at the edge of the vast Doggerland plain, the unsubmerged North Sea, but this would have gradually reduced in size as coasts approached what they are today, and Britain became an island again. Forested environment would have necessitated a change to hunting less social animals, using dogs, and a more flexible toolkit. There's evidence for Mesolithic occupation in Suffolk county-wide, but most are from unstratified or residual finds, so no real kind of detailed site evidence. But there are some key tool types, which I'll get into in a moment, such as Tranchet Axes, microliths, pebble maces, which can be used to diagnose and look at occupation distribution. Napped microliths, literally small stones. Various types were used throughout the Mesolithic. Microliths could be hafted using resin and different shaped wooden halves to provide different tool types, long cutting edges, projectile points. But it's the proportions of these various different shapes within the microlithic type that are often used to date flint scatters, so-called broad blade types, usually being diagnostic of earlier scatters, and narrow blade types being diagnostic of later scatters with various shapes within these. The initial early Mesolithic between 9 and 8000 BC is characterised by broad blade microliths, and it can be seen in the context of developing woodland environments of the early Holocene, with birch pine woodland in the earlier stages being slowly augmented, changed by the appearance of deciduous species such as oak, elm, and also hazel. Assemblages suggest a wide exploitation of a wide range of animals: red deer, roe deer, wild pig, but also smaller animals. There is also evidence elsewhere in Britain for exploitation of freshwater fish. The middle Mesolithic is again characterised by assemblages with broad blade microliths, but distinguished by the presence of microliths with retouch along their base. That's where the flint has been reworked around the edges. But the understanding of this middle Mesolithic is very poor, but it's possibly to do with the development of this woodland and maybe reduced territories, and possibly a greater exploitation of pigs and local resources. And you can also see some of the various shapes of earlier Mesolithic microliths on the slide. The late Mesolithic is characterised by narrow flint blade microliths, including increasingly militarised forms from about 6000 BC. You get four-sided pieces, semicircular pieces, little triangles, little rod-shaped microliths. This may be to do with the establishment of denser deciduous forest, requiring an alteration of hunting strategies. In the Mesolithic, new flint tool types appear, many of which are related to woodworking, no doubt due to the increased forested environment. Tranchet axes, axe heads or adzes, are one of the main diagnostic tool types for the Mesolithic in Britain. Tranchet referring to the nature of the flake removed at the tip. There has been much disagreement as to whether they represent a strictly early Mesolithic phenomenon, but they have also been found in later Mesolithic contexts, so perhaps that level of control is unwise. You can see they are found everywhere in Suffolk. They are very, very common and really show that there was a long and moderately dense population, or at least one that used a lot of axe heads at this time. So that has been a very quick run through of Paleolithic and Mesolithic archaeology in Suffolk. There's far more to read, and please find out more on the Suffolk Heritage Explorer. Please follow us on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook for updates relating to all archaeology in Suffolk, and please access the Heritage Explorer to look at the historic environment record for anything you're interested, your local area, your local town, and also some of those key sites I've mentioned today.